Hello, everybody. A few minutes late here. Had a little bit of technical issues getting things going, but hopefully that doesn't offend anyone too much. But to be honest, if you are deeply offended, then so it goes. I try. Had to reboot the computer very last minute, so just trying to get things loaded up and pop in the control center here. Don't know what kind of crowd we'll have on this blustery Friday morning. Looks like one concurrent viewer, so to whoever was sitting around for about 7 minutes waiting for this to go live, thank you very much. We still don't have a good indication whether people will be getting notifications for this or not. So best thing you can do is be the notification. So drop some knowledge on Twitter, in your favorite Discords, in your favorite Telegram groups. Go ahead and text your aunt, your uncle. Tell them that the crv.mktcap.eth is broadcasting live. And I feel like that's an important day to catch up on so many of the various curve things that we missed over the past week. Because admittedly, we were so just like by way of context, I've been doing this now for 2 straight years, and in the 2 straight years, I of course take weekends and banker holidays off, but I have otherwise been batting 999 or 998 or so. I missed one day where I couldn't get an article out in time, but other than that, I've managed to knock out an article out of the park every single day, so I'm very proud of what I've done with that. 4 likes and 1 concurrent viewer. Chase Manning, hey, I got the notification. Thank you. So it was a very, very big week in terms of celebrating this kind of 2-year anniversary. And instead of tooting my horn too much, I thought I would give myself a small break. There's been a lot going on with life lately, and I've been falling behind. It didn't seem at the beginning of the week like the tea leaves were suggesting that crvUSD would come out, which of course I would have had to break and do a big release had crvUSD come out. But other than that, there was not a lot of curve news, it looked like, for the upcoming week. So I figured, why not just take this opportunity to have a week off? But I didn't want to actually do like a full week off. So I thought I'd do is like a more of an experimental week where it would be a little bit easier for me to craft the articles. And from me crafting the articles, it could be pretty maybe fun almost in a weird way for people to see the fruits of it. So I was really having fun playing around with the OpenAI software. The OpenAI software was an absolute blast. So I feel like it's like at middle school level intelligence at this point, which is, to be honest, more intelligent than probably 60, 70, 80% of the population. So it's good enough for government work in most cases. Now, I was really trying to push it farther along the IQ bell curve. So I was trying to push it to, for example, design a new competitor to Curve or design a crvUSD stablecoin. And the results were not terrible in that, like, if I asked the AI to do it and I asked my parents to do it, the AI is honestly a little bit better at DeFi than my parents are at this point, which is pretty cool. No knocking against my parents, but when previously they were asking me about I was talking to them about Curve, and they'd asked a few questions, and they said, "So is this an investment in Coinbase?" And this is back when Coinbase stock was going up. So they didn't quite. They're not quite as sophisticated even as this kind of middle school level AI, which I was very impressed by. So the downside is it's not kind of that extra tier genius. So it's not all the way up to like a Michael Egorov level of sophistication and understanding, but let's be honest, very few people are, and this is still like an early build of this AI software. So I think we're going to see like much more impressive stuff coming down the line once they kind of hone it. The tough part is like they can easily hone it on the kind of middle school level of intelligence because there's so many people out there with so many terrible takes. It was really easy, I imagine, to train a bot to this level. But it's a question of sample size. There's not that many Egorovs in the world. There's only like a handful of super geniuses. So there's not a lot of data to do training on. But that being said, like you could really see like this effect playing out a lot as you played with OpenAI. Like one thing I would try and do is I would try and like have it talk using certain voices. And for example, on the day 3, I thought it exemplified this very well. Subscribers got the full look, where you could look at the presidential debate transcript between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And both these individuals have very unique cadences. So Joe Biden likes to toss in a lot of stutters, and then like yell at people. Donald Trump is like his like kind of like crazy like brash exaggeration. He always goes with the you wouldn't believe, the greatest there ever was. All those kind of like Trumpian type statements. And to my I was very impressed to see that when I started doing this, the AI really nailed those tones. I tried this with several other people. Like you could ask it to deliver a tweet written like Rodney Dangerfield, and it would toss in something like, "Hey, don't get no respect." So it actually did a pretty good job of like impersonating celebrities, but the impersonation was really like within this kind of like 80%. So I'd imagine, I don't really pay attention to a lot of like the Trump speeches, but I'd imagine 80% of them are probably about the same, not really rocking the boat, and then maybe like 20% of them or 10% of them like fly off the deep end. Similarly, like the AI was only going to give you responses in that safe zone, so they're not going to like venture out there into kind of crazy territory, which can happen sometimes. And in my opinion, this means that AI is great for replacing like the swaths of people that are just like good soldiers following orders, but it remains to be seen how it's going to handle those creative situations. You could argue you don't need that much creativity. And when I gave it creative prompts, it did a pretty good job. Like I was asking it in some cases to like design hypothetical stories for, it could be in the vein of something. So you could say, give me a comic strip in the vein of Bloom County, for example, and it would actually produce something. You could say, give me something like the TV show, give me like a sample script for a TV show that you like, and it could actually come up with a decent rubric. So it's creative enough for probably most cases. So overall, came away very impressed. I didn't ever quite feel like it was helpful in like just, frankly, one of the reasons I wanted to test this is like, could I replace myself? Is my job at risk? I didn't quite feel like that was the case. First of all, it didn't have the niche subdomain expertise on Curve at the moment, but I think there are things I could do with downloading the OpenAI kit, open source, and playing with it. And maybe I could actually replace myself. Maybe I could just get it to like read through all my old articles, read through all the Curve documentation, and take a look, and maybe it would actually be capable of replacing me. But the thing that I think it would miss in the tone is like, I always try and like add some kind of unique flair to the various posts I do. They can't all be winners, but I try and at least like come up with like some interesting hook or interesting twist on it. I don't know that AI could generate that without heavy prompting. So this really becomes like to be useful, like this back and forth type tool. I do think it could be useful in like brainstorming. Sometimes like my brain's just off in the morning, just how it is, and I'm like, how should I write this tweet? So like it's actually pretty good at saying like, take this paragraph and summarize it in a tweet. So I could take that and then I could add whatever tweaks to it that I wanted. So it's getting there is the point. And I think I will continue using it as a tool. I ran out my free tier credits, so I'm gonna have to be spending a few bucks to now use it. But it's at the moment fairly cheap. And I think just broadly, like there are two active fields of technology at the moment. Where I should say active, where it's like really interesting and just drawing people en masse. So one of these would be cryptocurrency. Like cryptocurrency companies like have a ton of users, a ton of interest. All the smart people are moving towards cryptocurrency. And then the other field is artificial intelligence. And I think we see this just because if you look at the most recent, like how people have been entertaining themselves in this bear market, people have basically just been saying like, I'm not really paying attention to the markets. I'm going to look at using this various AI tool. A lot of artistic generation, so DALL-E, Stable Diffusion. Mine has been more around the writing, so I've been playing a lot more with OpenAI. Charles Cooper of aka Big Tech Sucks of Vyper fame did a really great job actually getting me excited about the technology because he was looking at it in terms of how could he build out a compiler. And where he was really impressed is that he said that the answers, which I kind of concur with my assessment, if you were a student giving those answers in a class, you'd be at least middle of the pack. And this is for like college level courses. So when I said it's like artificially intelligent to a middle school degree, maybe I'm underestimating. Like maybe it's a lot better. Anyway, it did a really great job of impersonating a dumb person. So if you read through today's article, which I made open for everyone, I just was cracking up as it was coming through, as it was imitating a NPC. It'll probably be, yeah, I think it may have been a fairly contentious post. I think a lot of people were like, hey, I did not sign up for this. I signed up for Curve and Convex, and you're giving me like these bizarre like story time. But I explained the reasons up front for why I'm doing it, and I got no apologies. I had a lot of fun working with it. And, if I'm not experimenting, then what am I doing? So I probably won't be doing too many more experiments in the vein of this kind of week, but for a 1 week writing vacation, I think it was a lot of fun to do, and happy to hop back on the horse. One pseudo vacation, because it still was a fair amount of work to get everything done. No downtime in content over the course of all this time. I'm feeling pretty good, let me just say. But that being said, we missed a lot of stuff around Curve for the past week, because in crypto, you miss a day. I mean, one of the things that we missed this past week, I don't know if I could say missed necessarily, but the whole horse saga with Sushi Swap, which now feels like it was decades ago, that was quite a lot of fun. And ordinarily, I probably would have just dropped everything and written a whole horse article, because there's about 1 million great horse jokes in there, but I did not do that. That has nothing to do with Curve. That's just like an example of like what was happening this past week, because a lot happened this past week. So with Curve specifically, there was, I think, a few notable things that I'm probably going to put into articles next week, assuming nothing more breaks over the weekend. First of which would be the CLEV token. So the CLEV token has concluded its crowd sale with regards to Convex very fast, and it was selling 1-to-1 to Convex, but it's already about doubled since then. So I did not get into CLEV. I don't own any CLEV, but it's popped off very quickly, which is very exciting to see, because the team is really onto something. The Aladdin team, they are a bunch of big brains, and they are really walking the walk, talking the talk. And from the looks of it, it's been very popular, because if you actually look at the Curve site, you can see that CLEV has been... it only has 786K worth of volume in it, TVL, and it's got 125K volume in the past 24 hours on this. That's good enough for a base VAPY of 15.8%. So anyone who's been sitting and parking their Clever or ETH in that pool is probably doing pretty good. In fact, you're actually doing better in a way if you deposited ETH, because that's the asset that was... it was cheap, but it went up against. And this is before they've even bothered, I believe, to put the rewards onto it. So that's a pretty interesting pool to keep my eye on. I'd deposited some money into Convex ETH recently, and I'm almost wondering if I shouldn't roll that back into CLEV ETH. Because, as you can see, pretty interesting stuff going on there. And it does not look as if, I'm connecting my wallet now, it does not look as if it is getting or accruing any rewards at the moment. I'll just pop into that to make sure. So anyway, exciting stuff. Great work from the team at Aladdin DAO. Really excited to see that. The other interesting thing that I've got on my radar, which will also probably become a full-fledged article over the next week, is the launch of Vyper. So Vyper has successfully navigated its way through governance, which wasn't always a foregone conclusion, and it's really been popping off in terms of like their advertising really high yield. Although then I saw the Stake DAO team was kind of contending this yield. They were saying, we have to look at Convex, and the Convex rewards were not super substantial for Y curve relative to SD curve. So not exactly sure what to make of it, but I'm going to start reading more about it. The other thing that was really interesting was the launch of Karen Finance. Not Karen as in like the angry person who complains to me about my NPC article, but Karen, Charon, is in the Roman god that was ferrying users across the river. Styx, did they call it Styx in Roman, or was that Greek? I think Styx was Greek. I'm not sure what the Roman term for the river was. At any rate, Karen was the kind of messenger to the underworld, and It looks pretty cool. It's written in Vyper, so I like it. I took a quick glance through the contract, and everything appeared to be as written on the tin. So I thought that it was a great use of Vyper. It was looks like a good contract. I can't yet endorse it because I haven't actually dove into the details. But from all initial appearances, kind of doing a cursory look at it this week, CHARON Finance looks like it's pretty interesting as a way of basically moving amongst all the various different curve wrappers. So they had, from my look, you could move between curve, convex curve, staked out curve, Y curve. As there gets to be more and more of these curve offerings, we saw a lot more. And potentially we'll see Aladdin curve because they're doing a clev curve in there as well. And they also have an A curve. So I don't remember all of them offhand, but I would definitely take a look at all of those. So that is the biggest two updates I noticed in terms of curve over the past week. So curve, as always, just firing on all cylinders. A lot of fun stuff happening. There's a few other articles I'm interested in writing, one of which is like this really deep dive into some of the advanced math functions, as well as a deeper dive into the meta registry, which is launching, but not yet launched, or it's launched, but it's not yet been kind of programmed. The registry, like for anyone who's a developer, the capability of using the curve registries to move amongst different pools is amazing. So I'm able to, when I interact with smart contracts on curve, just always ape directly from the command line because it's that easy. But the downside is, as curve has launched multiple different types of pools. There's the original V1 pools, then the V1 factory, and then there was the Curve V2 pools that they were launching, like TriCrypto, that were launched by the team, and then there was the Curve V2 factory pools. So that's 4 different registries you have to look in. It can kind of be obnoxious. The meta registry unifies it all under one single registry. So that's a very exciting development. So I was going to do a deeper dive into that, as well as there's been a lot of work being done in terms of some advanced mathematics and how to build out some Vyper libraries that encode that. So I thought that would be a really interesting article to write about as well. That being said, I mean, there's already like 4 articles for next week. There's probably going to be a bunch of stuff that pops up, so we'll see. But those of you who are worried that there's not been enough curve contact lately, message received, and we're getting back to our bread and butter curve next week. The other thing I was thinking of writing an article about is just this deeper dive into DeFi and why would anyone use it. Meta registry is deployed, Chase. It is been deployed from a curve deployer to the blockchain, but it is not yet seeded with the information it needs to be useful. So it's exciting news on that front, and very exciting to be able to use the meta registry. So this article I'm thinking about writing is just like, what's the point in doing DeFi anymore? Because at this moment, like if you go to 3 pool on curve, you're getting like less than 1% yield on your 3 curve tokens, which back in the day was nice. Back when interest rates were 0. But now, like with the Fed continuing to push up rates, it's like close to 5%. What's the point in using DeFi? Why not just use TradFi? Why not take all your money off chain, dump it into a bank, and see what you can get? At least that's the argument a lot of people are making. And I think that there is still some argument for DeFi. So first of all, like in the same way I don't feel super comfortable having all my money in DeFi, I also don't feel super comfortable having all my money in TradFi. Like I'm more than happy to like keep some in each of it, but I assume that the money in TradFi is eventually going to get stolen because I'm going to say something stupid like my NPC article this morning, get myself like fined a lot of money or what have you. So I want to limit the damage there. I assume my DeFi money is going to get hacked. Not so much the stuff in Curve that's feeling pretty resilient, but you know, there could be a DPEG and there could be all sorts of things that happen. So I don't feel safe keeping my money in DeFi. Don't feel safe keeping my money in TradFi. I kind of have to like just spread it out everywhere and just hope for the best. So I do think that there's use and utility to keep some money in DeFi. And then honestly, like the money in DeFi is way better because it's just so much faster to move around. The only downside I see to DeFi personally as a user is that sometimes the gas gets crazy expensive. Like we saw the gas spiking this past week, and actually we're finally burning Ethereum as a result of, I think it was the Zen XE-in or something like that protocol, which was fairly poorly designed in terms of the incentives that people had just to kind of like burn Ethereum just to get some certain like leaderboard events emitted. great for Ethereum, and whenever it happens, I'm just like, all right, well, that's probably doing long-term good for Ethereum. Kind of crappy if you need to use Ethereum because there's like a big contract I wanted to deploy, and no real big luck getting it done because gas spiked and it wasn't urgent enough to want to pay a premium to deploy the contract. So these kinds of things can be like the obnoxious part of DeFi. But that aside, like so I flat out reject the argument that there's no real world use cases for cryptocurrency. I see nothing but real world use cases for cryptocurrency whenever I spend some time playing around within DeFi. It's just a blast. There's so much more, in my opinion, you can do with your money when it's in DeFi, be that dollar coins or Ethereum. So I was thinking of writing this article. It's kind of trying to rebut this idea of there's no sort of like need for people to use DeFi nowadays because of yield. Like I think high yield was great when TradFi was offering nothing else. But I also think that like one of the principles we've seen a ton within DeFi is that yield carries risk. And if you want to translate that in the real world, the fact that the US is offering incredibly high yields on treasury bonds means that they're using that rubric a risky asset. Now I know that the US treasury bonds have been gold standard for the past like 200 some years. So you don't have a lot of concern that the US is actually going to default. But we also know that macro is crazy right now. So keeping some money in DeFi as a hedge is not the worst solution. Like there's always the possibility that something unforeseen happens and the US misses one payment because it's now a significant portion of our national debt trying to pay off these bonds, is my understanding. I'm not a big macro Chad, but if that's the case, like we may end up defaulting just because we get a ton of pressure from, let's say, China to repay these bonds. And if we can't do it without printing money, or maybe just print a ton of money and then there's more inflation again. So it's like you could see arguments for death spiral. Like again, I'm not the biggest macro Chad, but I've been watching the Fed as everyone else has because it's a little bit depressing having to sit and like wait for the Fed to pivot for all of our bags to go up. And you know, full disclaimer, like I want prices to go down, so I actually kind of like the Fed doing what they're doing. So I can just like buy up some of these coins on the cheap. But I also acknowledge that the sentiment of pretty much everybody is garbage when things keep going down. So on that level, like I'm excited for the Fed to finally be done with this and then for us to get a bull market back. Because, you know, full disclosure, I completely flubbed my prediction. I predicted that the Fed was going to pivot before the election. Clearly that's not happened. And I, on some level, like I feel sad for like Biden supporters because they're going into the election with a super weak hand. And it's just like, it's embarrassing is what it is for Team Biden. And, you know, I know a lot of people on Team Biden who are really good people, so I don't want them to feel embarrassed. I want, as an American, I want to be proud of my president. I want to be proud of our country. So, that being said, I see the view count dropping off, or I can't even tell with these stupid analytics. Drop some comments and questions in the chat so I can know if there's actually anyone here. I see anywhere between 2 and 5, but the graph says like almost 10, so this whole thing's wacky. Where was I? So I was talking about like real world use cases for DeFi. I think it's got it in spades. I think that the composability is kind of like the lower risk in some cases. Like I consider 3-pool to be a fairly low risk asset, and it's nice because you can easily like compose 3-pool into other pools. So if I have a 3-pool token, I can easily ape into any curve pool that I like that is using 3-pool. I can easily unwrap to DAI, USDC, Tether. So I just find it to be like an incredibly useful token that pays me to hold it. So I prefer some of these DeFi tokens to some of the like TradFi, just keep your money in a bank, because like I think the other real world use case that doesn't get hammered home enough is just how hard it is to move money using banks. I've seen complaints about like if it's impossible to send $10,000, and that's true using TradFi. It's almost impossible to send a few $1,000s. Like transactions I routinely make, such as like payroll, continually get like hey, Chase will say, we can't process this transaction for some reason, so you're going to have to go into your bank to do it. So which is the better use case? Like using MetaMask, which takes a second, or having to hop on my bicycle and head to the bank every time I want to send $1,000? I mean, it's a no-brainer. Like, the whole thing is getting quite crazy. So I still think that there's use cases for DeFi. I think on Arbitrum in particular, there's a ton of interesting use cases. So I'm very bullish on DeFi still. I think that we're going to see more and more like activity going there. Now, that being said, at the end of the day, the killer use case is still greed. But I don't think that that's going to be as big of an issue as people think. Because for one, I think that we're pretty quickly going to see tokenized treasury bills on DeFi. I don't know who's going to do it. I don't know the mechanism by which it could happen. It's kind of rough because it kind of feels like it has to be like a Tether type company. Now, Tether's in a great position, it feels like to me, because they've got $60 billion that they've moved mostly to T-bills. So they're going to be earning like 5% interest on that. So that's like a few $1 billion a year just walking around money. So Tether is like one of these like big beneficiaries of this because they don't do almost anything except for just like sit there and park their money in T-bills. So pretty funny stuff. So Tether's going to be, I think, coming out of this in a really good use case. But I think that someone's going to either do a direct backing where you buy a T-bill in real life and tokenize it like Tether, or like they'll find a synthetic way of doing it. But once there's like a synthetic T-bill of sufficient volume, which I'm not endorsing anyone to do this, and if you do want to do it, of course, I think you should talk to a lawyer. I hate that I have to qualify it because it should be a good thing for the United States if people, T-bills find their way in DeFi, but the United States is not always proven very smart, so they might well use this particular live stream to send me to the gulag, which is why the last live stream I had to make private because it was a bit too feisty, let's just say. I do think that there's an argument that we're going to see T-bills find their way into DeFi. And if T-bills do find their way into DeFi, then all of a sudden everyone's just going to be able to compose their stablecoin against a guaranteed 5% interest off of it. Which means you're pretty quickly going to see whatever the baseline is in TradFi bleed into DeFi somehow. Now, I imagine there's a few obstacles to it. One is that other than buying T-bills directly, like there's not a lot of good sources to get that risk-free return. Because if you go to bank accounts, they're still offering like 0.25% in some cases, which is up from what it used to be. So I still think that these yields are somewhat mythical unless you're actually buying T-bills. But it's not that tough to buy T-bills. You can go to treasurydirect.gov and start purchasing. We also know like DAI is starting to back their stablecoin using T-bills. They made their first purchase the other day. So I think we're pretty quickly going to find T-bill yield onto DeFi. And when that happens, like you'll be able to take any stablecoin, get a base rate of 5% on it. So that's going to somewhat solve the yield problem. And then on top of that, you can get whatever token emissions you're happening to be sweetening the pot. So I still think ultimately we're going to see better yields coming out of DeFi. It's just going to require like slightly different architecture. And again, for any of the, I know most of my fans are feds. For any of the feds watching, I'm not planning on launching this. I'm not interested in launching this. Again, if you want to launch a service like this, you should speak with a lawyer and a registered financial advisor. But I think someone will do that groundwork and will launch this and will make a lot of money. It won't be me. I'm just going to sit here and shout out stupid ideas while I do my stupid NFT projects. Which even that might need to be cut back coming soon, because America's just gone really, really blazingly hostile against cryptocurrency in the past few months. I don't 100% know the rationale. I can speculate on it. Essentially, like, no one can predict the future, and we might well see nothing happen in the next election. But I also think there's an argument where there's going to be a massive shift in parties in Congress, at which point we're going to be in a split government again. And both parties are terrible, but I always like a split government because it means that less happens in DC. Potentially, this could mean that the power gets a bit rebalanced just a bit, and the Democrats might not have as free of a hand to allow Gensler to do all of his shenanigans. They might not have as free of a hand to allow these stupid moves that we've seen the U.S. make in terms of like sanctions and the CFTC claiming the authority to be able to serve via chat. It's all sorts of crazy stuff. Whoa, boy, my viewers dropped to 0 when I'm talking about this. So someone hit the brakes. I feel like I have more. The YouTube stuff is so flaky. Who knows what's going on? But clearly, it's not a topic that people want me to talk about. So go ahead and drop your questions in the comments. I will try and get to those before we wrap up here on this gorgeous morning. Not seeing a lot in the way of comments or questions rolling in. Anyway, my theory about why they're making these moves is just because now is the opportunity they have to do it. We know that there's a lot of people in power that despise cryptocurrency, and they might not have a blank check to like run all their crazy games when things pop open. So once things start popping off, this is like their last window to do it. After the election, they might need to start like facing like much more pushback. And big credit to all the crypto community that's doing that pushback. So David Hoffman is suing Janet Yellen. It might end up being a moot lawsuit because she might just well be out of office by the time the lawsuit even goes processed. Gensler is gunning for Yellen's job, so we can imagine that Gensler is going to be out at the SEC. And then maybe, like, who knows, maybe under a Republican Congress, maybe the mood will be to appoint Hester Peirce, crypto bomb, as the head of the SEC. And my unpopular opinion is I think that it would probably be about business as usual with Hester Peirce as the head of the SEC. But I'd still welcome the tonal change of having Hester in command of the SEC as opposed to Gensler, because Gensler has just been a downright embarrassment for our country. Gensler is a national security risk. He's undermining U.S.'s national security, and he needs to go. Just point blank. Like, U.S. cannot operate as a nation with Gary Gensler in charge of the SEC. It hurts me to say that because I attended a school. I paid a lot of money to attend a school where he served as professor. I thought that I had high hopes for him because I thought he understood the technology. And that's why I don't have high hopes for Hester Peirce. If Hester does take over the SEC, I imagine that the sort of internal pressures at the SEC as well as the external pressures are ultimately going to override any individual that is kind of running the department. Because it can be very difficult for specific departments to course correct. I think that kind of sums up the entirety of the United States. It's this big machine that is, it's a Leviathan, and it's so big that all of its moving pieces just keep going and just keep going, even in the event of some of this like changes in administration or changes in policy. Like, the administrative state doesn't particularly care. It just keeps pushing its agenda. I was actually fairly inspired on that point by an article I read this past week, which was, looking at, like, I think this was based off of a Balaji Srinivasan tweet, where he was pointing out that there might be a sort of terrible middle ground in the outcomes. Like, we're talking about World War III being nothing, or the end of life as we know it. And this article raised a fairly compelling point that even if it's the exact middle of that, even if it's 50% of the population dies, we're likely to see civilization keep going. So there's a lot of people who are like, I've noticed like in real life, a lot of people like are being asked to go back to the office and they're dragging their feet, and they maybe are thinking they can hold off till after civilization collapses. And the article like made a compelling case that civilization doesn't really collapse. There are all these kind of like bureaucratic mechanisms that work excessively well in the background and even manage to survive some of these most calamitous changes. And but the big example they pointed to was the bubonic plague, the Black Death, which ravaged Europe. It was so deadly, it was killing about 50% of the population. So a huge number of people died. That is the sort of like high watermark, which we might look at and say, like, if 1 out of 2 people are dying, society can't function. And yet, if you look back at records amongst Black Death, like, all the courts still kept functioning. All the various like bureaucracies of society that were in place at the time kept functioning. In fact, they were more important than ever because all of a sudden people were dying left and right. So they needed to carve up wills and territories and stuff like that. And even though like you don't know who's going to be in the office any other day because people just be dropping like flies, society persisted, particularly like the elements of society that have been stickiest even through kind of the biggest, like most calamitous events tend to be like, for one, certainly like courts. Courts seem to keep processing and having some kind of wheels of justice that grind no matter what. Taxes just keep going. Taxes are incredibly resilient to revolutions, whoever's in charge. Like there is this kind of administrative state. They also cited the example going on in that like, even though like I'll avoid saying names because I don't want to trigger too many of the censors, but even though there's a lot of political instability in the world right now, between like massive outbreaks of conflict, a lot of these countries, bureaucracies are still working together and still trading things like energies back and forth. So even though there is like this massive number of countries in shelling and like trying to push us into World War III, there are bureaucrats at the government, functionaries whose job is just to keep trading money with each other. And that's still continuing unabated, even though they're trying to kill each other in real life. That's how powerful the administrative state sort of is. It's like this large organism that it's not, those people who are hoping that's going to get killed, it's not going to get killed, it doesn't seem like. Which is kind of scary because they only, the only recourse for it then is it can become stronger. And we've already seen how it's been flexing its might because it's very powerful lately. So we will have to see. All right. I'm not seeing a ton of questions. The viewers have returned, so I did a good job of talking about topics that were more inbound. I'd be curious because there was so much going on in DeFi this past week. I haven't even talked anything about the goings-on in, for example, Bogota. I'm not terribly interested in all that, to be honest. The whole backpack thing, that's some culture wars that I don't care too much about. But if you've got thoughts or questions about that, Crv, like the big news I mentioned over the past week, which you might have missed if you were following my newsletter because I was busy playing with AI. Crv has launched Clev. Crv has launched a Crv pool containing Clev and ETH has launched. It's doing very, very well. It's not even rewarded yet. We saw the launch of Ycurv, the launch of Charon, CHARN Finance. So a lot of big developments over the past week for Crv, and I'm sure we'll see more in the next coming weeks. Launch of the meta registry. So a ton of exciting news. You don't need to worry that my little dalliance with AI has soured me on Crv or anything. I'm still a Crv maximalist. I am still very enthused about all the various tokens in the Crv ecosystem, including but not limited to Convex, Clever, and now Concentrator. All the stuff going on with Frax, all the stuff going on with Yearn, all the stuff going on with StakeDAO. All these are just brilliant people, best in all of DeFi, building a parallel financial structure and knocking it out of the park. So, I'm not seeing a ton in the way of questions. Like, it's live streaming. These live streams are only as good as your chats. So please, if you've got questions about DeFi, win crvUSD. crvUSD will be released whenever Michael Egorov wants it to be released, would be my answer on that. I cannot say too much about crvUSD because I've asked if I could say even very oblique things about it in the past and not gotten permission to do so. So I understand that Michael wants to keep this very close to his chest. The one thing I will say is that I know that they are... I've gotten to play with the front end as well. Front end is looking very good. So it's going to be on the new crv.exchange site, so get used to using the new Crv site as opposed to the old one. And I've looked at the back end, and the back end is mind-blowing. I won't have any writer's block the week it comes out because I'm already prepared to write at least 3 articles on crvUSD when it comes out, probably 4, because there's some major leaps in there that I'm not even sure people are going to appreciate when it first launches. So I'm very excited about crvUSD. I've seen more and more going on with the world of debt-based lending in the past like while, which I think is a really good development. That was one of the rejected articles I tried to get the AI to write this week. Was I was trying to get it to write kind of like more in-depth expose on lending as it applies to traditional and decentralized finance. And the article was not coming out to my quality standards, so I had to scrap it. Maybe I'll see if I can redo it on the future week or something. But there's a very strong and compelling case that can be made that debt is the entire backbone of our monetary and financial system. So the existence of all these various debt protocols are probably doing more for bringing finance to DeFi and kind of out of this existing financial system than anything else. And by the way, like, am I talking the Leviathan earlier? I know it sounds pretty bleak about like all these like organizations that are controlled by the government. But I think people who are hoping that system goes away are going to be disappointed. But I think people who are hoping that that system gets displaced by a more active and better decentralized financial system is going to be a positive change. So I'm of the expectation that we're going to see the Leviathan not go away. It's just going to become so irrelevant relative to DeFi that no one's even going to care. That's my prediction on a longer time frame, like 10 to 20 years. You might all be dead. I'll be alive. TJ asks, what is the collateral for crvUSD? So I'm going to say, honestly, I don't know. The contract is written in such a way that it's not clear. We'll have to wait to see what launches to know for sure. The only thing I can point to would be the front-end API leaked, and you can read on that GitHub repository some sample code that they have. So the sample code of the crvUSD API, it is designed for using Ethereum as collateral. So there's a good argument that Ethereum is going to be featuring prominently within the use case for crvUSD. I don't know if it's the only one. I don't even know if that's going to be the launch one. I don't know if like that there may be others. That might be the only one. Until we see what actually gets launched, I can't say for sure. So I'm not going to comment just yet on crvUSD as far as the collateral. But that's the biggest clue that we have, is that it seems like there is a use case for lending Ethereum and receiving crvUSD according to the front-end API that has been made public. So that's where I'd start looking. What is the best resource to navigate the DeFi field? Asks Sharif Ahmed. If I want to decide which is the best place to invest my ETH at for the first time, that's a good question. So of course, like, remember that we never offer financial advice here. We are only offering kind of technical overview and like maybe occasional cultural comment on stuff. We're never talking about financial advice. So the first thing you need to do is talk to your registered financial advisor. But Chase Manning, perhaps having talked to his registered financial advisor, says DeFi Llama is pretty great for that. I would agree that DeFi Llama is a great place to start any research within DeFi because they are going to have a huge list of resources. What I would say to you, Sharif, is if I were trying to evaluate this decision, the questions that I'd bring to my registered financial advisor would involve dissecting what sort of risk I wanted to take. And by that I mean that there is sources of yield for Ethereum where you are putting it at less risk and you don't expose it to impermanent loss. And specifically what I'm thinking of here is if you run an Ethereum validator node, each validator node seems to make about 0.01 Ethereum per 0.1 Ethereum per month, which is not bad. I mean, per 32 ETH, making 0.1 Ethereum per month, that's pretty good. And then there's some probably things you can do on top of the validator node to maybe juice that. But if you're willing to subject your Ethereum to more impermanent loss, then some better yielding opportunities might arise. So we always see this principle of more risk, more return, less risk, less return. So, for example, one of the pools on Curve that I'm perpetually a fan of is TryCrypto2. Again, not financial advice, but TryCrypto2 gives you hedged exposure to USDT, WBTC, and WETH, aka WETH or WETH, wrapped Ethereum. By far, this is my favorite pool on Curve because Sam of Frax says it very nicely that there's sort of $3 trillion use cases within cryptocurrency. There is the Bitcoin, which is just money. There's Ethereum, which is programmable money, and there is dollar coins. If you're invested into TryCrypto, you get all of the above, plus 13% curve return, which is not bad. And you can take that and put it in convex, blah, blah, blah. That being said, there's a lot of good curve pools if you want to take that risk where you could earn Ethereum as well as various other assets. So, for example, the Y curve pool just launched. That's not Ethereum. Some of the like Curve ETH pools, Curve ETH is earning 24%. There is Convex ETH that's earning 18% boosted rewards. Like 18% return, in my view, is pretty good in terms of knocking out risk from impermanent loss. So whenever you're placing money into a Curve pool like this, see you, Chase. Thank you for joining. Whenever you're placing money into a Curve V2 pool, you basically have like exposure to both assets, and when the price moves, you're going to have more of the one that does worse. So if you are invested in the Curve ETH pool and the price of Curve goes up, you got more ETH. If you invest in the Curve ETH pool and ETH goes up against Curve, you get more Curve. So if you're invested into a pool where you don't mind both assets, that's great. Then you would be fine investing into either pool. Into that pool, and whatever comes may come. Plus, you get some Curve rewards to balance it out. For that reason, like the Curve ETH pool is a great pool, and I might go into it just for the returns on it. But it because it gives you Curve rewards and it gives you more exposure to Curve, I could see that being less appealing than the Convex ETH pool, which gives a few % fewer rewards, but is pretty good. And then one more quick note on TryCrypto, like there is a little bit of timing game perhaps in how you play it. So you can think of TryCrypto as a ERC20 LP token that itself is redeemable for ETH, Tether, or Bitcoin, but it's hedged amongst it. So if Bitcoin shoots up, you're dragged because a third of the pool is dollars. So you're getting like 2/3 of the return of if Bitcoin and Ethereum are soaring. And then if Bitcoin and Ethereum are high, and it drops, then obviously you're going to be losing some, but not losing as much. So it's a little bit hedged that way. But what I really like about TryCrypto is, like, I'm fine with all those assets. Like, I like dollars, I like Ethereum, I like Bitcoin. The thing that I would watch for is that if you want to try and time the market, which I don't do because I'm not a good trader, I'm not very good at timing the market, but I do broadly think that, like, we are at a lower point in crypto as opposed to a higher point. So if there's a time when I would be saying like buy crypto, it would be now. Whereas at the top, I'd be more inclined to sell crypto. I'm only one way into crypto, so I don't even act on this. But that being said, like if you're trying to time the market, like I would argue that the dollar is overly strong and crypto is overly weak. So you might see it balance in the other direction. Which means if you think it's going to be going that direction, you would like to be buying into TryCrypto 2 with dollars. And then when TryCrypto 2 gets high, you would like to be buying into it with Ethereum or Bitcoin. Because if you buy into it at the high point, when it goes down, you get more Ethereum and Bitcoin. So if you're trying to time the market, you might want to be wary of buying into TryCrypto right now using ETH or Bitcoin. It would probably be the right time to buy in using dollars, because what's going to happen is when the price, if I'm right, if the price of Ethereum and Bitcoin goes up, it gets more scarce. People try and withdraw ETH and Bitcoin from the pool. You might deposit 1 ETH into TryCrypto and you can withdraw a little less. Now you might not mind because your dollars will go up. You can withdraw more dollars. It just depends what your goal is. I'm entirely looking to get more cryptocurrency, so my goals may be different from yours. That's a kind of long answer, and I did the focus with this as curve pools. As mentioned, you can check DeFi Llama. There's a number of great places that you can drop your cryptocurrency, your Ethereum, and earn some yield. But the question you have to answer for yourself is, do you care about impermanent loss? Like, are you willing to wager and lose some of your Ethereum? Or are you interested in lower risk options? In which case, you'll look at maybe some of the wrapped Ethereum options like Coinbase ETH, Steph, running your own validator node, Rocket Pool. TJ, why convex curve is keeping the peg not as good as SD curve or new Y curve? Not sure it's a noob question. That's a good question, and that's actually worth a full article. So I'm jotting that down as something to write about for next week, because that's a good one. So the reason that convex curve is not keeping the peg as well is because it's sort of built into the convex curve architecture. I don't want to say it's designed to depeg, but it has two different kind of peg mechanisms on either side. On the one side, you can always redeem a curve for a convex curve. You just take your curve, give it to the wrapper, always get one out. So that peg is really strong. The reverse direction, the peg is only held by the incentives that are tossed into the pool. And that is not as good. In that, so first of all, like if you're trying to use a pool to incentivize a peg where a peg should not exist, then there's no real amount of incentives you can throw at it. That being said, like there is kind of broad agreement that convex curve is worth about a curve, but it does occasionally see that pool prone to runs, which means that in time, you can think of it as like, in most cases you can get your money back, but in some cases you can't. So convex curve is realistically, I'd say its fair valuation is not one full curve, just because one has more utility, the other doesn't. So I would argue that the price of a convex curve should be like 99.5% the price of a curve. And what you see is there's some natural fluctuations. So when the market is good, the pool, like people just want to dump as much money as they can in that pool because it's earning good rewards. They have convex curve available. They have curve available. They'll toss in anything. They don't care because they get good rewards. And if the price is below peg, they toss their money into the pool and they get it back. They make back enough money that they don't even care about any slight fluctuation in the price. So that is the bull case for why it's going to work. The downside is like when there's massive times of financial panic, some people need to sell off their money and they can't sell off convex curve anywhere except for this pool, whereas they can sell off curve on various other sites. So there is demand for curve when people need liquidity, and that means that during that time, the pool depegs until someone wants to take advantage of the arbitrage. So if you hold a convex curve, the upshot is that most of the time you can trade it back at or near peg. So that's good. And plus it earns like really high yield. So like whatever 1%, 2% might be off, you don't necessarily care about. The downside is there might come a time of panic when you can't return it. So needless to say, the Y curve and SD curve don't quite have those same properties. And I think I'll reserve it for like the full article, the full dissection as to why these peg and don't peg. But that would be a really fun article to write for next week, just exploring the ins and outs of SD curve, convex curve, clev curve is coming. I think that'll be a really good question to address. All right, I am seeing, at least I know Chase, who has been a stalwart since the beginning, has left. I see 3 people commenting, and TJ, Sharif, and Chase, and YouTube is reporting 0 concurrent viewers. So I don't know what's going on. I think I've been yakking for an hour, so it's probably a good time to bounce and let all of you get on with your Fridays. Fridays are hopefully a day of much rejoicing for all of you. I know that with so much fun stuff happening in crypto, it's like impossible sometimes to tear yourself away. But I would recommend getting outside. We have maybe a month left before, in my part of the country, it gets cold. In your part of the country, I don't know what. Let's enjoy this nice weather and enjoy this wonderful weekend. Take some time off. Thank you, friends. Stay safe. Remember, none of this financial advice, none of these hypothetical products you should launch without talking with your local neighborhood Fed. But thank you, everyone. We really appreciate you listening and chatting.